Today is January 5th, 2022. My name is Rob Carr of Kalamazoo Right to Life, and this is Pro-Life Week. Well, here we are at the start of a new year, and this could be a very, very special year. The year when the Supreme Court may very well either overturn Roe v. Wade entirely or permit states to make major, like mid-course corrections on abortion policy and enact new laws that support the right to life. So we're looking for that. We're praying for that. We're believing that the court's going to do the right thing when they issue their decision come June or July of this year. But today I just want to talk briefly about a comment that was made by a woman connected with the NAACP. Her name was Sherilyn Ifill, and she is, so let me look at my notes here, she is the Legal Defense and Education Fund president. Well, back in December, she was pretty incensed when the Mississippi Attorney General, Scott Stewart, made a comparison between Roe v. Wade and Plessy versus Ferguson. You know, he was the man who was standing before the Supreme Court justices arguing in favor of the Mississippi law that bans abortions after the 15th week of pregnancy. So she was upset that he made the comparison between Plessy and Roe. So what was Plessy? We talked before, just a reminder, a little refresher. 1890 Supreme Court decision that said that states could enact racially segregated policies as long as they were separate but equal. Homer Plessy was a man who wanted to ride on a train that was segregated, and he was a black man, supposedly. And he was fined. He challenged the fine, and he lost in federal court. And the court established this separate but equal, that you could have a separate school for a black student as long as it was equal. Well, the big joke is that the school was inherently inferior, whether the facility was inferior or the supplies, the books were, or the teachers, you know, everything about the school was an inferior form of education. But that it expanded. You know, you had separate drinking fountains and separate movie theaters, or at least in the movie theater you had to sit up on the balcony if you're a black person. Separate restaurants, separate funeral parlors. You know, everything was separate. Everything was separate. And she is upset that there's this comparison being made. So here's what she said. An accurate command of American history makes clear that there is and should be no comparison between Roe and Plessy. Roe recognized a fundamental right. Plessy was an affront to the very idea of universal individual rights and equality in the United States. While Roe recognized that the liberty protected in the Constitution includes the right of women to access abortion care. That's an interesting term even in itself, abortion care. But I won't diverge on that. Plessy endorsed and upheld a racial apartheid system that denied the equality, dignity, and humanity of black people. Well, I agree with her that Plessy was a horribly decided decision. I agree with her completely. But you know, I get tired, I admit, I get tired when I hear these liberals and pro-abortion people dredging up that stale, worn-out apples and oranges argument. You know, you can't compare Roe v. Wade to Plessy versus Ferguson. You can't compare Roe v. Wade to Dred Scott. You can't compare Roe v. Wade to the Holocaust or the killing of Jews. You can't make those comparisons. Those are false equivalencies. And I get tired of that. I'll be honest with you. I get tired of that because I think you can make a fair comparison with all three of those cases because As the Jews were denied civil rights and were exterminated, as blacks were enslaved as bond slaves for generations, as blacks were denied civil rights with Jim Crow laws, so the unborn is denied the right to life because he is not a person in the whole sense. He's only a potential person. He's not a real person. Where's the Joe Biden science? Remember, what does Joe Biden say? Follow the science. Where's the science in saying that the offspring of a human mother and a human father is not a human? There's no science for that. There is none at all. So I think it's a fair comparison that denying the human rights for the unborn compares very easily to denying human rights for European Jews as well as slaves or blacks during the Jim Crow era. So, and look at Dred Scott, the Dred Scott decision. Dred Scott was a black slave living in St. Louis, Missouri, a slave state. His owner was an army surgeon, so he was an officer in the 1840s, and he was transferred to a new fort up in Wisconsin. So for 2 years, this doctor lived in Wisconsin, and he brought along his black slave, Dred Scott, up to Wisconsin. So 2 years later, he's transferred back to St. Louis, so Dred returns to St. Louis with him. Well, Dred Scott argues, quite convincingly, I think, that for the 2 years he lived in Wisconsin, he was a free person because Wisconsin was a free state. And he went to court, but he lost. He lost in federal court. And the Supreme Court ruled in Dred Scott that a black person could not even sue for his freedom because he was an inferior being, not really a full-fledged human person like we think of today. He was an inferior being like cattle that could be bought or sold at the whim of his master. So that's Dred Scott. So the unborn baby very nicely fits into that category of being not only inferior, but being less than human, to be killed at the whim of the mother who has sole right of life or death over that innocent baby. Okay. Now, I just want to finish with this one thought here. In the Declaration of Independence, our birth certificate as a nation, it says that all men are created equal, endowed by God with certain inalienable rights. Those are rights you can't take away from people. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But Thomas Jefferson, the author, said that we're all created equal. It doesn't say that we are born equal. It says we are created equal. That act of creation does not come when you come out of the birth canal, the moment of birth. You're created, I would say, when you're conceived in the womb. When sperm meets egg, that's when you are created by God, at the beginning, not at birth. Then I would also argue in the U.S. Constitution, it says in the preamble that we form a more perfect union to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Well, who's the posterity? Our children, our descendants, our grandkids and our great-grandkids, those future generations. Well, what is the unborn? The unborn is our posterity, our children. So I would argue that even in the Constitution, there are protections. The reason that our country established a government was to protect the blessings of liberty for ourselves and for our children. Forever, you might say. So I'll let you go with that. Remember, keep praying for the Supreme Court, for the Dobbs case, and just believe that God's going to do a great miracle this spring when the court kind of takes off its blinders and sees the unborn child for what he really is, a human person created in the image of God who deserves to be protected. With that, thanks a lot. I'll see you next time.